Are you ready to make the most of your oil and gas mineral rights? Welcome to the Mineral Rights Podcast. Get the knowledge and resources you need to manage your minerals and royalties. Here is your host, Matt Sands.
Hello and welcome to the Mineral Rights Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Sands, and I'm joined by my co-host, Justin Williams, and we're here to help you make the most of your minerals and royalties. And in this episode, we're going to talk about some tips for protecting yourself in the digital world. So sort of cybersecurity tips for mineral owners. And Justin, like we were talking before, we hit record, the scammers and the fraudsters are getting ever more creative. And there's even, more creative and more innovative ways they're trying to scam people.
You said it, Matt, and this plays into specific scenarios for mineral owners. This plays into the common things that we see all the time, and we're going to kind of cover them from all angles to try to protect folks and make sure they don't get caught in some of these, which, Matt, I know I've ran into situations I would have said I would never fall into it, but they get more sophisticated as time goes on.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I've seen these actually where there are people that are impersonating an operator and they request updated banking information for direct deposit or, personal information so they can, open a credit card or, try to access your financial accounts. And, this is something where, it was an email spoofing situation. So one example, before we dive into the details that I've personally experienced. So I have some minerals in Oklahoma. The operator, I think they were going in bankruptcy or there was some issue. And so there was, this kind of critical time period for this operator. There was somebody that was actually impersonating the operator and sending emails, claiming to be the owner relations department asking for information. And fortunately I caught it and said, this, seems strange. And actually they had also sent out a warning email after I think it had been reported that it was, a phishing attempt. And so there's some terms we'll use, and we'll put links in the show notes to some of these kind of general online security and scam type threats so that you can do some research. And like Justin said, we're going to talk about some of the things that mineral and royalty owners specifically, that we might face owning this type of property, because it does sort of put a target potentially on your back because it is a public record, who owns minerals and royalties. If somebody, you file a deed or you file something, somebody might be looking out for those types of things. And then, very sophisticated type of attack where they're looking to, gather financial information or try to take advantage of that situation. And, then we're also going to talk about just sort of general online hygiene or online cybersecurity tips, just in general, not just related to minerals and royalties, but just some of the tips that, that we've found to be helpful in protecting yourself, online.
Some of the basics that you run into are some of the stuff we hear a lot nowadays, which is, watch for text messages that are asking you to log into websites that don't appear to match the who's asking. I know USPS is someone you see a lot. Be leery of grammar. If something doesn't look right, something doesn't feel right, something doesn't seem right, it's probably not right. And I know, Matt, a good tip of advice when it comes to these incoming links like this, don't use those links. Navigate directly to that provider's website or whoever that is, and then attempt to log in there rather than using links sent to you.
Yeah, that's a great tip. And I think most financial institutions will not email you links. You're better off bookmarking that page on your web browser. And then like Justin said, navigating directly to that page. So if they send a request for information or send, a statement or an update and there's a link in there for you to click on, be very careful before you click on any links in emails, regardless if it's from an oil and gas company or if it, like Justin said, if they're impersonating the USPS, UPS, I've seen those. I get those text messages pretty frequently where they say, hey, we were unable to deliver your package. Click on this link. And, it's from an international phone number. And that's a big red flag. Obviously, companies that are based in the United States won't send text messages from international phone numbers. And then, so I think that's tip number one is do not click on links in text messages or emails without doing a little more research and making sure that it's a valid link. And like Justin said, if the link is to ups.com, well, that's probably a valid link. But, if it goes to xyz abcups.com. And then it's like, okay, they're impersonating, they're trying to make you just at first glance think that it's from UPS, and you're going to click on the link, and then they're going to, they're going to ask for some personal information and then try to scam you. So, I think those are some good, initial tips, just regardless of the type of service provider or company that you're dealing with, be very careful before clicking on links.
Another area, Matt, that we really run into a lot with this is email. Email is something we use commonly, every day these days. However, we kind of fall into the trap of what we email is something we use every day today, but maybe we shouldn't be using it for certain types of information. And I think people get caught by this a lot. Typically, when you're in a hacking situation, that email is the primary target. If they're able to secure access to your personal email, they're able to reset passwords within their accounts. And so that's the primary target. And I myself am guilty of this, and I know many others are, but sending information that has your social security number or bank account information through email is really not a guaranteed way to keep that secure. Whether a hacker gets into your account, whether that's intercepted in transit, email isn't necessarily as safe as we'd like to think it is.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I've experienced that a couple of times with my personal email address where somebody, either the email password, the company was hacked, the password was leaked. And even though I have, a password manager, I have unique passwords for every website that I use. They're long, alphanumeric with special characters. So, not something that somebody can just try to figure out just based on, birth date or name of a pet or something like that. And even still, people have changed the password, but then they've run into a roadblock and they can't get access because I have two-factor authentication enabled. And so I think that is, like Justin said, they're trying to go through email, trying to get access to these accounts so that they can read your email, so that they can find out where you bank and then go from there, kind of leapfrog through and try to access to those accounts. But again, if you have separate passwords for every website that you log into, that's critical, I think, nowadays. And then also that you enable two-factor authentication. And, if you're not familiar with that term, what that means is that you need another code or another way to verify that it is you that is trying to log in or access your account. And so what that would actually look like is, the best way is to have an app that would have a unique code that resets every, I think, 30 seconds or something like that. And you enter your password and your username, click login. It'll say, okay, now provide your code. And you set this up in your account. You can set up in the settings, two-factor authentication. And, this is the best way, the most secure way. Another way is sometimes you can use your cell phone and they'll text message you and say, here's a, 6-digit code, enter this to gain access to your bank account or gain access to your account. That's, probably the next best way, or to get like an email code that, that's another alternate way to get that two-factor authentication code. But people can, spoof a SIM card. And so they can, basically act as you within the cellular network. So that the network thinks that spoofed or that fraudster's phone that they're trying to use to access your account, they think it's you, and they send the text message and it goes to you, but then it also goes to that other person. They use that code and then log into your account. So that's why having a two-factor authentication code that is linked to, an authenticator app itself is better. And we'll talk about some of the tools and resources that you can take a look at, as far as password managers, those 2FA or two-factor authentication apps, things like that here at the end. So stay tuned for that. But, I think that's a key thing. The reason that the cell phone code is not as useful, I've had people call impersonating my bank saying, hey, we have a fraud alert on your account. There's somebody tried to use their, your debit card or your credit card, and we want to confirm that this is a correct charge. And they'll give some, obviously fraudulent charge. You'll say, oh no, that's not it. And they say, okay, we'll confirm we'll send you a 6-digit, log in and give me your 6-digit code that you'll get. And that's a red flag, because the company, like the bank or the operator or whatever website or other account that you're trying to access, they'll say on there pretty clearly, usually, we will never ask for this code. Do not give it over the phone or anything like that. Because what they're trying to do is they're trying to get your two-factor authentication code so that they can log in and then, steal your money or whatever. So that's a big red flag. If somebody calls, claiming to be your bank, saying that you have a fraudulent charge, give us that 6-digit code that you'll, log in and we'll just confirm your identity that way. That's a big red flag. Never give that over the phone. So that's another way that someone will try to access that information.
Yeah, you said it, Matt. And that third-party authenticator is a really wonderful tool. And that was one of the reasons they've kind of surged in popularity, is that it really helps us secure those in a way that there's not many other ways to do currently. Another aspect, Matt, that applies to mineral owners specifically is the protection of the physical and digital documents. I know that's something that, we kind of get complacent with what these documents contain and the information that they have in them. We think, they're public record. We don't need to worry about it. But along with those documents that are public records, we also have division orders. We have direct deposit documents, and those can really be something that we need to either keep tightly secure, or maybe we should be providing those back to the operator and then getting rid of those so they're not just laying around or available digitally. Matt, another thing that plays into email here is I know I am guilty of trying to send these division orders back by email, trying to send direct deposit forms by email, and a lot of operators won't allow you to. And that is because email's not always secure. So one of the ways that you can kind of eliminate this issue is fax these documents directly to the operator, send those via mail, be aware of what has your sensitive information and protect that carefully.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think, if you're unsure, I would err on the side of using those secure methods to communicate that. Again, like Justin said, it's, direct fax. If you still have a fax machine / scanner printer, one of those multifunction printers, they have the ability to fax things. Sometimes you have to have a landline. Some of them will do it electronically, but it's a direct link. The other thing is, the snail mail, right? So we hate sending mail because it takes a long time. You want to get your royalty check ASAP. But this is one time where it maybe pays to take a little bit more time. It may take a few extra days for them to get the division order physically, for them to process it through their mail system, and then for them to, release the first payment. But it's better that you have that securely transmitted to the operator than it, that information getting leaked, including your social security number is the key piece of information that they ask for with your division order, directly on the division order or through a W-9, because they need your tax ID in order to not withhold backup withholding, which you need to give them that. So that is a valid thing for an operator to ask for your social security number. Again, because it's for tax purposes, they'll need that. But the way that you communicate that to them should be secure, and if you don't have a way to send an encrypted email or an encrypted attachment, then definitely use the fax or the physical mail option, because that's a little bit more secure than sending it electronically. The other thing too is, like Justin alluded to, you have public information out there as mineral and royalty owners, and that puts a little bit of a target on our back. We have deeds that show that we are the owners of these mineral rights and royalties. And if somebody's sophisticated, they can figure out, what that means in terms of the value, and then try to steal it. And one way that they try to do that is by recording a fraudulent deed. So that is an attack vector that somebody can use to steal your property. Now, thankfully, it's not something that occurs very frequently, but, all it requires for somebody to record a deed, and forge your signature, and then act as that quote unquote buyer, and then claim your royalties going forward. And there's been a couple of times we reported on this, and then different news episodes of where people have done this and they've gotten caught and gone to jail, and then, had to pay back, to the royalty owner. But that's a big headache. There are some counties that will allow you to register for a fraud alert. And basically what that does is you register the names or the parcel ID of the properties that you own in that county, and they will notify you within 24 hours if there is a document that is recorded related to your name or to that parcel ID. And the purpose there is that it's trying to catch if somebody records a fraudulent deed so that you can catch them in the act before they start receiving those royalty payments that you should have gotten paid. So, that's why it pays to stay on top of all of this, to, make sure that you're, aware if there's a deed or if you stop receiving royalties, but you think the well is still producing. That's a kind of a red flag, is if the royalty checks stop coming. You check on the Oil and Gas Commission's website and the operator's still reporting production for those months that you've missed. Now, sometimes there's other reasons. Maybe it's in suspense because the minimum royalty amount has to accrue to like $100 before they'll cut another check. And so maybe if you're getting a low amount of royalties, that might be the reason. But if you're getting, a significant amount of royalties each month and it just stops, but then they're still producing, then that's something going on. That's where you need to call the operator and find out, is there something going on with the well or with their accounting, or if not, then you need to go follow up and look and see if there are any deeds out there that maybe somebody had fraudulently recorded. So that is something that does happen. Thankfully, again, it's not super common, but it's something to be aware of.
Yeah, you said it, Matt. It's something to absolutely keep your eyes open for. And if you see something that doesn't seem right, look into it further. And Matt, in a digital world where, we have to have all these passwords and different tools and different resources, one of the things that we're really not talking about enough as a generation is how do we pass this information to our heirs? I know in my life and my scenario, if something was to happen to me and you didn't know my passwords, you really wouldn't know much and you wouldn't be able to find much. And I think that's reality for most people these days. So how is it and what methods do we have to get this information to the next generation and to set up this so that they can access the data?
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's where the password manager, in my mind, is a huge benefit. I use Bitwarden. There's others out there. I think Proton has a password manager. But the whole point of that is you want to use that password manager with a unique password for that password manager, that once you enter it, then you have access to all of your accounts and all of the passwords, and you can set it up. There are browser extensions, for like Chrome and other common browsers that Bitwarden and these other tools have. And so that when you log into the password manager and you navigate to your bank website, for example, and it will, autofill, if you ask it to, it'll autofill your username and password. So you don't have to memorize that, 14-digit alphanumeric password that is unique for that website. You can have it stored, encrypted, and safely in that password manager. And then it'll still allow you the convenience of being able to, auto fill in or, your password. And there's others out there. So if you're an Apple user, the Apple keychain, they have the same functionality. So, you can store your password within your iPhone or your Mac. And then when you go to a website, you can auto log in. And the great thing with a third-party password manager like Bitwarden is that it does use two-factor authentication. So you have to have, an authenticator app, like Google Authenticator is one. And a lot of these are free. Proton, I think, like I said, has a authenticator deal. And then Authy is another one, AUTHY. And basically when you set up your account, there's like a QR code you can take a picture of and it'll store it into your password manager. And then you can go in and it'll automatically refresh every 30 seconds with a 6-digit code or whatever the website sets it up to be. And then, like I said, it's one of those things where every so often you'll have to use that two-factor authentication code to get into your password manager. But then once you're in there, you'll have all your access to all your passwords. And then again, any website that allows you to set up a two-factor authentication code, you should do it, because that provides just an extra barrier for someone to have to go through before they get access to your account. And it's very difficult for them to log into, even if they know say that that company or whatever, that website got hacked, all the passwords got leaked to the dark web, and hackers have access to it. They try to log into your bank account, for example, or whatever it is, but they can't get there because you have a two-factor authentication set up and they don't have access to that secure link, that one-time password basically that you will allow them to get into the actual account. If you didn't have two-factor authentication set up, when they get access to your account because they hacked that company, well, all of a sudden they have access to your finances and your money and potentially can drain your account. So really important for, especially if nothing else, for financial accounts and anything, related to your minerals and royalties. I think an Energy Link now requires two-factor authentication, things like that. So that's a really important step.
You said it, Matt, and we're all guilty of reusing the same passwords. It's what makes sense to our brain. It's hard to remember a ton, but a lot of these password managers allow us to generate passwords that are far more secure than our typical long-term password that we've reused many times. And it makes an easy solution for having those unique passwords across different websites or interfaces, or that every account has something unique, which can be really important when it comes to a situation where it gets leaked on the dark web, because it kind of stops them in their tracks, where there's an assumption on the scammers' parts where they can reuse, or you did reuse these passwords, and they're able to access a lot of things. All right, Matt. So wrapping this up, there are some other things that we should really be careful of. There's some basic stuff that we've heard a lot over the past 10, 15, 20 years, which is be careful of the software you download. You really want to be extremely careful of what software you download and install on your computer. You want to be sure that that is not something that contains malware or a virus inside of that. That can allow them to get access to the data on your computer as you're putting it in, logging your keys. If you don't have an antivirus and anti-malware software on your PC, you certainly should, especially if you're using that for financial information or to store your data. And then, Matt, there's some other tools nowadays like LifeLock. LifeLock is a tool that everybody became familiar with data breaches and companies having to pay for the LifeLock subscription. They also do a certain service when it comes to title and securing your titles and giving you notifications of any changes that have happened in title. What are some other good tools, Matt, that are kind of developing and would be good for mineral owners to be aware of?
Yeah, I think one of the most important tools that everybody should have, mineral owner or not, is a VPN. And that stands for a virtual private network. And that allows you to use a public Wi-Fi. So for example, you go to a Starbucks and you're traveling and you need to log in to transfer money on your bank account. Well, you don't want to do that on a public Wi-Fi because it is open, and somebody that is sitting there in that Starbucks could be monitoring the traffic, and it's wide open, so they can see everything you type and everything you enter. And so if you enter your username and password into your bank, and again, you don't have two-factor authentication, well, they can just go immediately after you leave, log in, access your account, sweep it, and take all the money. So do not use public Wi-Fi for sensitive transactions. So that's accessing financial websites and things like that. The VPN will allow you to, even if you're logging into, you're at the airport or you're at Starbucks and there's a public Wi-Fi, if you log in via your VPN, it has an encrypted tunnel that goes directly to the website that you're going to. So somebody that's sitting there in the airport or in the Starbucks is monitoring your traffic. It'll be encrypted and they won't be able to see what you're typing or what you're seeing on your screen. So that is a really important tool. A couple of good VPN providers, Molvad is one that is, I think, in Switzerland, I believe. Proton is another one that is really good, and then iVPN as well. So those are three possible options. And I think it's worth, in this case, to spend a little bit of money to get a reputable VPN. And it's not very expensive. Usually it's like maybe $20 a year or something like that for the VPN subscription, so that you can use it in those cases where you need to access financial information and whatever on your computer. Now, if you, another alternate way potentially, and again, do your own research and make sure that this is still a valid way, but you can, instead of using Wi-Fi on your phone, use the 5G data link or whatever, because that is encrypted as well. So any type of encrypted data transmission is okay. And, sometimes it's better just to be using your phone on a cellular data connection rather than logging in via public Wi-Fi, because you have that direct link to your cell phone provider that transmission is encrypted usually. So that's important for sure. Another one, I would say, another tool is, like in those password managers. So two that are I think two of the better ones out there, Bitwarden and then Proton. And we'll link to all these websites in the show notes so that you can go to mineralrightspodcast.com, look for this episode, and then we'll list all those links there. Another one, so encrypted email, that's another great resource. And especially if you have other family members that use the same encrypted service provider. So Proton Mail is a great one. I have some accounts on Proton. They have free accounts that you can use. It's limited in the amount of storage or amount of email data that you can send or store within your inbox. You can, of course, download anything offline and then delete it from your inbox. I think you can get it like a gigabyte for free, and then just a little bit more than that to pay for a Proton Drive account or also Proton Mail. So that's a good one. So having that encrypted email so that nobody can intercept your emails and see, what your plans are, what your, sensitive information is. And again, the way for that to really work is it has to be to another person that has that encryption enabled. Otherwise, it goes out into the open when it goes to get through the email servers to someone outside of the network there. But, again, if you had all your family members with Proton email accounts, that could be a way to help just provide an extra layer of security. Like Justin, like you mentioned, I think those fraud alerts. So whether it's with LifeLock, that's one that's a paid service, and then free service, could be in some cases your county clerk and recorder may allow you to register for a fraud alert. So you can again put your legal name into the system and put parcel numbers and things like that. And so anytime anything's recorded against your name or against that parcel ID, you'll get an email notification that says, hey, was this you? Did you record this deed for your house or for these minerals? And so that's a good thing to have in place if your county offers it, or, if you can use a paid service like LifeLock, like Justin mentioned. Another tool out there that's free is the annual credit report. So checking your credit report through the 3 credit agencies once a year is a great way to make sure that nobody's opening a credit account under your name without your knowledge. So you can kind of monitor your credit that way. So that's always a good thing to have a handle on, to make sure that side of things is also secure. Anything else that you use, Justin, or that you've come across?
No, man, I think we've pretty much covered them. I think this is an eternal challenge for all of us. We all kind of, as we're bumbling through things, want to be lazy when it comes to creating passwords. And it's worth taking your time and going back and auditing your financial accounts. Did you create any with passwords you probably shouldn't have used? When was the last time it was changed? And this is, just the reality of life today. This is something 20 years ago we wouldn't have thought about and would have handled the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing, too, before we wrap this up, is making sure that all of the devices that you use, that the operating system is up to date. There are important security patches that, for example, if you use a Windows PC, they will publish, and you'll see the little icon that says, oh yeah, your computer needs to restart to install this security patch. Do it when it's convenient. I know sometimes it'll pop up in the most inconvenient time. You just want to silence it and ignore it. But make sure that when you get a chance, when you're done doing whatever critical thing you need to do on your computer, that you install that security update. You reboot your computer so that those latest patches are in there, because there are exploits that people find in, whether it's Windows or, iOS or Mac OS or whatever operating system you use, that they will try to leverage to exploit and get access to your information, and so that's, another attack vector. You navigate to a website, there's this critical security flaw within Windows and you haven't updated it for 2 years. Well, you're vulnerable then to that potential risk if you click on the wrong link and you go to the wrong website. Now, that's why you want to have that updated. Same with your phone, same with Windows Update. Usually do it when you're sleeping, and so it's pretty minimal effort or pretty minimal impact. But just make sure that you do install those updates on a regular basis so that your devices are up to date, because they're usually finding these vulnerabilities within their software and they're patching them and making sure that you're protected, once you have that latest version of that software installed. So I think that's another important, from a hygiene perspective and like a security perspective, to make sure that you do. And it doesn't require a lot of technical knowledge. You just, usually end up rebooting your computer. It'll do it automatically a lot of times, but just make sure you do that and you don't tell it to forget and ignore it. So if you have any questions, find a family member that you trust or someone that you trust that you can, share, what you're experiencing. So for example, we've had some issues of some of the organizations that I've been a part of where they'll impersonate one of the officers, on the board and say, hey, I need you to pay this invoice and, send a PayPal to this address or, get a gift card. And that's a pretty big red flag as well. Anybody that saying, hey, I need an urgent, send me a gift card, send me money, via Western Union or PayPal or something like that. That should be a big red flag. And before just blindly sending that money, try to contact that person. Say, hey, did you send me this text or did you call me to ask for this money? And they'll be like, what? No, of course I didn't. And then you can catch those. So don't believe everything at face value, because especially with AI, deep fakes are going to be even more of a problem. So that means that anybody, like Justin and I, we have a lot of recordings out here, of our voice. So somebody could use it and they could impersonate us and, contact family or whatever. And so having a safe word. So that's, I think, a really important thing for these very sophisticated, more modern attacks where people are impersonating somebody. It sounds like their voice. What they're asking sounds suspicious, but hey, it's this person. I know their voice, and that's definitely them. Well, I'm gonna believe them. I'm gonna send them the money, and then all of a sudden you find out it was a scam. One way you can challenge that is by having a safe word with your closest family members or closest friends, so that between you two, the only people that know it. It's not written down anywhere. No one else could possibly know this. You could tell them that safe word. Say, hey, what's the safe word? And if they don't know it, that's a big red flag, right? So then you can, catch it that way, because that may be the only way that we are able to catch some of these super sophisticated AI deepfakes, in the future, because it's just getting so easy for people to use this technology. It's getting so powerful. So not to scare you, but just to know that, there's some definite things you can do to protect yourself against these types of attacks. Again, you just have to stay on top of things because things are changing so rapidly.
It's going to change it in ways we don't even realize yet. And, if we start with a good foundation of being secure in other ways, we can help to kind of ride that wave as it comes in.
Absolutely. Well, again, you'll find the links to the resources we talked about today in the show notes at mineralrightspodcast.com. Thanks again for listening. Thanks, Justin.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks so much for listening to the Mineral Rights Podcast with your host, Matt Sands. Don't forget to subscribe and share at mineralrightspodcast.com. The Mineral Rights Podcast should not be construed as investment, legal, or tax advice. All information is believed to be from reliable sources. However, we make no representation as to its completeness or accuracy.